Hey guys, welcome back to another AI conversation, and I'm happy to be back on the saddle with Eric and Steve of Superfocus. Welcome back, gentlemen, to AI conversations. All right,
It's great
let's
to be
pick.
with you again.
Yeah, cool, Steve. Actually, now Steve's back in the U.S. and Eric's in Manila, and I'm also in Manila. So this is a global call. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. So just to recap for everyone else, if you guys haven't seen that video, I'll put a link somewhere around here for you guys to click back. Steve and Eric, Super Focus is in the business of enterprise GPTs, enterprise large language models, and they're looking specifically at agent assist BPOs. So let's come back to that conversation, gentlemen. Maybe with just a little bit more detail. Can you do just a brief explanation of what you guys are trying to achieve, and then let's take it from there.
Great. So let me just give a slight summary so people don't have to watch the last episode, although, of course, we encourage them to watch it. But so our company, Superfocus, is a Silicon Valley tech startup working with large language models. And the problem we set out to solve is to build an AI that does exactly what you want. It doesn't hallucinate. It's going to perform on a narrow knowledge base. So that the standard scenario would be something like you're a BPO in the Philippines. You already have training manuals that your people use that outline procedures, rules for when to issue a refund, how to troubleshoot a product. All of those materials can just be absorbed by us. To say it in a slightly technical way, we install those materials as the memory of the LLM. And then the LLM behaves like a human that can communicate through voice or text using perfect English language or any other language. Um, and it will always behave as if it's a human that has fully memorized all the training materials. So even if you have 10,000 pages of training materials, it will be able to answer questions instantaneously based on the information that's in those training materials. And if that sounds, if you've processed what I just said, you may be saying to yourself, wait a minute, can't that fully replace a person with a headset on? And the answer is yes, it can. And in fact, is in certain circumstances. So maybe that's a good introduction to what we do.
Another thing, one of the visual metaphors we used on the last podcast was the 6-foot tsunami versus the 600-foot tsunami.
It's a very nice Tsunami shirt there, Eric.
Thank you. And one of the things we also discussed was when you asked Steve, how would someone over here at the distance know whether the encroaching tsunami was 6 feet tall or 600 feet tall? You said that if you were to see a bunch of US tech entrepreneurs and AI engineers go from the United States to the Philippines, that might be a signal that the tsunami is on the larger and taller side. And to that, it does seem to be the case that that will be a recurring trend. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I just
mean,
want to add that
yeah, go for
I
it,
just want
Steve.
to add that, in our last interview, as we said, uh, Eric and I had many meetings with BPO companies in Manila, and we were very grateful, Eric, I mean, Dom, for your help in, helping us understand the landscape, where IT and AI adoption are within your ecosystem. And I think there are many, many ways in which the technology we've built can make uh, Philippine BPOs much more efficient and able to compete with what is coming.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'm happy you guys had a very productive right before Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. Meet a lot of people, and I think just to summarize, now that we're on the other side of the New Year, it's 2024. Compared to a year ago, the tone has shifted quite a lot. Number one, it's not about doom and gloom in the existential sense, although you still hear those conversations. Now it's about what do we do? How will jobs get affected? And maybe this talks to what you mentioned, Steve, before about, just understanding the nature of the work. Because I mean, automation is not a new topic. We've had discussions on automation a lot. And one thing that, as you both know, I work very closely with the IT BPM associations, part of IBPAP. The conversation is now which jobs are at risk. And when you say at risk of complete displacement, but there's also such a thing as partial displacement. People also talk about which jobs can qualify for augmentation. So I think those are the two extremes, right? One is totally automate everything, machines take over. And then on the flip side, it's more about humans with more capacity because of AI. So being assisted by AI, agent assistance. So um, I'm sure people are by this time, have heard about number one, our first conversation. So maybe for their benefit, can you talk a bit about that, kind of that inspiration when you're building these applications, and how would you distinguish if there's already some form of a framework between jobs that can be completely automated out and a use case for agent assist, or it might be completely client dependent. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when we first started the big issue, you sort of hinted at the hype cycle for AI. So when people first encountered ChatGPT, they thought, oh my God, we're all going to be killed by AIs soon. And then when people tried to adopt ChatGPT in the enterprise over the last year or so, they've realized, well, these models are not completely reliable and they hallucinate. They sort of make things up sometimes. And so I can't really have that AI representing my global brand with customers on really important matters. And in the background, companies like us have been developing tools that suppress hallucinations, that narrow the scope of the AI so that it will answer perfectly on some narrow area, but and won't deviate from that. So now you're starting to see installs of our kind of AI. So it's sort of now this quiet productivity curve. Um, you know, if you talk about the range of problems where the AI can be deployed, on one end you have agent assist, where the agent's still there with the headset. I think most people still right now prefer to talk to a human if possible, but the agent is made 20, 30% more productive by having access on their screen to the AI, which could be listening. It could actually be doing voice to text and listening to what is being said between the two people in the conversation. And it can quickly generate recommendations or procedural steps or scripts for the human agent with the headset on to say. This relieves tremendous stress on the human agent and cuts down on delay time and increases accuracy and makes the number of resolutions per day for that human worker go up by maybe 20, 30%. So I think most BPO operators will understand that's an incredible value proposition to have a tool, just a tool. It's hidden from the end user, but it makes each human that is employed, each agent that's employed by the BPO 20, 30% more efficient. So that's one extreme. The other extreme, though, which we can actually demo for you, I think we prepared some audio files for you, which actually show the AI picking up the phone. So now there's no headset attached to a human ear. The AI picks up the phone, talks to the human in a pleasant voice, can understand what the human is saying with very little latency. And actually, in some of the examples we can show you, the AI is trying to troubleshoot some difficulty that the caller is having with their TV, big screen TV, and the conversation is branching depending on what the human says to the AI, and the AI is doing this on the fly using the manuals and troubleshooting procedures that it has installed in its memory thanks to Superfocus. So you'll see it's very impressive. It looks like something that is maybe better than a human because a human agent might have to look up, oh, which model are we talking about? Oh, does that old model have a problem with the Netflix app? The human might have to do a bunch of things which cause lag and cause the human to, be a little bit distracted from the customer that's calling while they try to navigate the knowledge base or something. Whereas the AI will just do this instantaneously as if it were a human that had fully memorized and comprehended every one of the 10,000 pages in the knowledge base. So it's very different. So we could demonstrate that to you if you think your audience would like that.
Yeah, let's get into it. But before we get to that, just trying to put myself in the shoes of I guess a BPO operator, thinking out loud. Certainly, the need for human contact, which is highly contextual, depending on the kind of product or service, is one aspect. Another thing I was thinking about is maybe at the end point, it doesn't make too much of a difference. Although I do agree it would be a productivity boost. But in terms of onboarding a new agent, I can imagine this thing is going to have a massive impact because it's going to take time for an average agent to kind of understand all of those things. But you have an AI that knows it almost already. So you might have relatively new agents assisted by this expert AI, and maybe at the end of the day, the impact won't be that much. And then finally, the scalability of your operation can increase a lot because obviously these machines, they never get tired. They don't go on leave. I mean, to be to be really blunt. Um, so capacity wise, you'll have a more stable capacity. I'm just thinking out loud of some of the thought processes. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
just to amplify some of what you said. So what's scary or shocking to people is when you, for the fully coupled to voice example that I gave that we're going to demo for you now, the capacity of the AI, which, it's really running in the cloud, and we can get as much, if you need surge capacity, we can just run more instances of it. And these things can handle thousands and thousands of simultaneous conversations. So it just can't compare to the human staff in terms of how you can vary the capacity of it. Also, as you mentioned, like for some really complicated things, like helping someone troubleshoot a consumer electronics device, there's got to be a large training curve. Like, I don't know how to troubleshoot my TV. I have to figure it out on the fly every time, right? So if I had to learn how to do that for 20 different models, let alone hundreds of different models, the learning curve would be very intimidating and would cost the company a lot of money. The BPO would have spent a lot of money training people. Whereas you could just shift to something like, Jane, just trust the AI. What the AI tells you as the script for fixing the TV, you can just read that off the screen to the customer. You can trust it. We're not forcing you to become an expert on these TVs. We are just asking you to rely on what's written on the screen for you by the AI. And that means that lady could literally go to work on probably day one, right? If you got to that point, she could go to work on day one, and that whole 60 days of training that you used to have, that cost is eliminated by just having her rely on the AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, let's not hold the people back in too much suspense. So, do you have a demo or a video you want to show,
Yeah, I'll share.
and maybe talk through the context of it and see, so people know what we're going to be listening to.
So this is a demo which is built for a global brand that sells televisions. And if I mention the name, you would know about it, but we're under an NDA, so I can't really do that. Um, Once again, the AI is responding in real time to what the customer says. It's running through an LLM, large language model process, where the large language model is finding the relevant information in the memory that we've installed, and then the AI is answering the question. But furthermore, it can conduct a multi-part conversation where it remembers what the human customer said 5 turns ago in the conversation, and it's basing what it says on the aggregated information that's happened in the conversation. So it's a conversational AI that knows what to do. If the person says, oh, the power cord was disconnected, then it knows it's going to respond to that. If the power cord is fine, it's going to move to the next step in the process. All of that is built into the AI, and the AI has now passed quality assurance testing we've done with this company using thousands of the most difficult questions that they've stored over the years. So it performs much better than an average call center worker.
All right. I think you have to toggle the volume. Yeah, there you go.
Check if you are getting an error code from Netflix. Some issues with Netflix will generate an error code. You may be able to search for the error code on Netflix's website to find specific instructions on what to do. Please let me know when you are ready to move on to the next step.
Ready.
Next, follow the step 3, power cycle the television. Unplug the power cord from the back of the TV or the outlet, whichever is more convenient for 5 seconds. Then, reconnect the power cord and turn on the TV. Please let me know when you are ready to move on to the next step.
Reconnected power cord.
Great. Now, let's move on to the next step. 4. Perform a factory reset on your television. You can do this by going to the system settings on your TV and selecting Reset and Admin, then Reset to Factory Settings. Please note, on some models, system may be labeled as Help. Please let me know when you are ready to move on to the next step.
Yeah, done.
I'm glad to hear that you've completed the steps. Please check if Netflix is working now. If you're still experiencing issues,
Yeah, so I have a question. That was a really good, in a way, in situ illustration of what's going to happen. The AI obviously sounds kind of robotic, right? And I don't think that was an issue. But um, I think it's really more about how clear the instructions are and testing various scenarios. So it would be, in a way, a step up from your usual branching decision tree. But in this case, it's a more dynamic one because it's an AI doing it. Did you encounter? I mean, as you were testing this, like really like edge cases that could have caused problems, and how would you normally deal with those? I mean, just to give, potential BPOs an idea of how that process might go.
Yes. So this particular project was done with a global brand that has been selling TVs globally for 20 years. And so they have several hundred models that they support. So as you can imagine, there are many, many edge cases. And so what happened is when they first gave us their training materials and various knowledge base type things that go into the memory of the AI, at first, it might have had like a few percent um, error rate where it would misunderstand which model it was talking about, or sometimes we even discover incorrect things in their knowledge base that the AI picked up on, was giving the wrong answer, but because it read it somewhere in their knowledge base. That few percent over time, because we would then go in and our engineers would then fix those things, got pushed down to 0.5%. So that means out of 1,000 really difficult queries that they would use for the testing set, it might only get a handful wrong, which is far better than their human agents would do. So there is a tuning process. It depends on what error rate you want to get down to, but I think we can get easily to a superhuman rate. That's not actually an issue. Now that we've been through this process with this particular global brand, we've really improved our own architecture so that the AI is better and better at picking out the fine details and making sure it's doing a step-by-step process with the human. All these things now have been improved to the point where our engineering allows us to turn around in basically a single day. If the BPO can give us the training manuals at 9 a.m., by the end of the day, we can actually typically give them the first cut, V1 of the AI. They can test it. The way we would suggest them to test it is to have their experienced agents play with it and see how it's doing. If they detect some things that we need to continue to improve on, we'll just keep doing that, obviously. But the turnaround time for just the initial experience for them to say like, wow, these guys turned around and this thing answers like, 98% accuracy on my knowledge base, and it's better than most of my humans already. And now we're going to improve it some more. That turnaround time is very fast. We're not forced to completely retrain the model and do some $100 million large compute on the language model. We're not doing that. We've built an architecture that installs the memory so that and forces the LLM to consult its memory when it's answering questions. And that process takes very little time, actually.
Yeah, you mentioned that piece, like installing memory is not as onerous as kind of fine tuning a model, right? You hear that term fine tuning a lot. Um, can you talk a little bit about the data preparation? Is there a special way of preparing those manuals from the BPO side, or do they just pretty much hand you over all those PDFs and you guys take care of everything?
Yes. So the amount of work that the BPO has to do is very minimal. Now, I will say that one of the most disconcerting things is when we find it's for both us and them is when they find errors in their knowledge base, because the AI is not, it's not allowed to like, correct an error if the error is in the knowledge base. It's just going to go by what it's been told, right? So that's the one step I would say to them is like, please make sure your stuff is high quality. Now, surely they would want that to be true for their human agents too, right? But just make sure your knowledge base is high quality. But other than that, it can be in PDF format, it can be some web pages, it can be a set of PowerPoints that you use to train people in a conference room. It could be anything like that, because as you know, these AIs are very versatile. They can read and comprehend all this stuff. Now, on our end, we are doing a lot of sophisticated stuff. So we are taking that knowledge base, which say it came in PDF format, we are mapping it into, now I'm going to say some techie jargon, which if you're not techie, you can ignore this, but we map this into the vector space of concepts used by the LLM. And we might, in an automated way, insert certain markers that make it easier for the AI to search through that and identify what particular subchunks are saying. We might even process it through using another language model to stick in those markers. There's a bunch of proprietary steps that we engage in that at the end just give you, that now if you're not a techie, you can turn your ears back on. The bottom line is it will behave like a human that has instant recall over that knowledge base. That's the end point. There's a bunch of technical steps that have to be done, but they're done by us. They're not done by the BPO. It's all invisible to the BPO, and we've automated the process.
And then I guess in the same manner, data preparation, is it better if the technical manuals to be installed are in FAQ form, or can they just be, for example, equipment or technical specifications or product manuals? I mean, is there a
Well,
noticeable difference on the literature that would make this process better or worse?
so let me list 3 different formats that we've seen and dealt with a lot. One is a literal FAQ where they list a question and then they have an answer. Another is a script that an agent is supposed to follow under a certain circumstance. And then the third one is just free form writing, like which could be a product manual, or it could just be, some text that's on somebody's web page. By now, we've basically set things up so the AI can learn and perform based on any of those formats. It's extremely powerful. It understands, even if it's not given a step-by-step process, if it's written as just prose, it can extract from that a step-by-step process that it's going to ask the human to perform. So there's no differentiation. Now, I can imagine circumstances where there's some really, really important thing, like maybe the company says, hey, we notice a lot of fraud, and sometimes the people who are asking for a refund are saying this. Be on the lookout for that. And we could easily write some enhancement of the language in the knowledge base to make sure the AI is really solid on that particular point, and just stick it in the knowledge base so the AI will see it. It literally works like that. It's almost like if you notice some problem and you notice you want to fix that problem, you send out a memo to all your people with the headsets on, and the people read that memo and they note, if someone is calling you from this city in India and they're asking for this, hey, be very careful. Like, ask them these follow-up questions. In the same way that your staff, your human staff, would get that memo, and then most of them, maybe not all of them, would then adapt. The AI will adapt right away. Like, we can add that on the fly to the attached memory, and then the AI from then on will actually, when it's actually encountering that particular issue, will look at it and take that into account in its behavior. So it really is very powerful and configurable on the fly these days.
Yeah, I mean, what you said uh, brings to mind maybe 3 points. Well, number one, obviously, it's very good to say or hear that in terms of preparation, the only thing you really ask from the BPO is that everything is factual and correct, right? So make sure there are no mistakes in the material. But in terms of formatting, it can be FAQs, can be product manuals, can be free form. You guys have picked that up. The second is in terms of lag. There is no lag in terms of, okay, we want to update this particular paragraph in that particular manual. You don't have to take the system offline, or is that kind of no, you don't have to. That's really good.
We do not. We do not.
And then finally, you mentioned fraud. So maybe for me, I'll blow that up into a broader question. How does this work in terms of call monitoring? So in terms of deployment, are you seeing any particular processes? Because it could vary by client, right? But in the same way, I could barge into any call center agent if I'm like the floor manager and say, hey, look, this guy's making a mistake. I'll come in. Or the other way around, the agent gets a manager. So does that factor into kind of how the AI will work, or is that still case to case depending on the client?
So in terms of implementation, there are a lot of different scenarios. Like the simplest scenario for us is if suppose we are assisting an agent and you give us your training materials and we come back and we say, here's a URL that your agent just points their browser to that URL and they use your pass key. And then from then on, they have a thing which is on their screen advising them. So it's very easy, no implementation other than they point their browser at the right thing and log in, right? That would be the absolute easiest implementation. From then on, you can get much more complicated. Like maybe you want the AI listening in on your audio system, right, and making suggestions. Or that's much more complicated in terms of engineering. Um, I wanted to say that in terms of a manager monitoring performance of the AI, it's very simple because, of course, in order to fine tune the system, we are logging everything. So we can in real time, you could have a manager with access to our logs, and the manager could just be sitting there like, of course, like maybe the AI is like having 100 simultaneous conversations. So it's pretty hard for your manager to read through those, but they're available. So the manager could be searching like, okay, I know I'm very worried about this refund process or this upgrade process. We don't want to give too many upgrades to people on these flights. You know, they can be searching easily through the logs. The logs are accumulating. They're just growing as the AI has more and more conversations, and the logs are searchable. So the manager can just be like, okay, keep searching for upgrade and see how the AI is doing. Is it giving too many upgrades? Is it being too stingy? And then they can come back to us and say, hey, let's change the language in the guidelines that are in the attached memory. Let's rewrite it this way and see if we can fine tune. Well, I don't mean it in the language model training sense, but we can adjust slightly the tolerance level of how the model behaves, right? That all of that is possible. And it could even be that, let's suppose that you go to an AI only system, but you have your most experienced guys on your human team. You then make them quality assurance people and have them just looking at the logs of what the AI is doing during the day and making sure that it's not screwing up or doing something wrong, and we can always make adjustments. So you could have a situation where you have really the absolute highest quality because you maybe got rid of your agents that weren't very good, but you saved the last 3 or 4 agents that are really, really good. And you just have them monitoring the AI to make sure it behaves properly and then making suggestions to us, which then we can implement, on a 1 day-ish kind of time scale. So that system could be like the highest quality system you could possibly have.
Yeah, it brings to mind one of the, because you also mentioned fraud earlier. There was a case back in about just about a month ago of a customer that was able to trick a chatbot into selling him a Chevy Tahoe for $1. So, I mean, obviously that's one of potentially many ways chatbots can be misused. Have you gotten to a point where, based on a client's requirements, you're able to run through kind of these? It could probably fall under edge cases as well, but it's not just edge cases in terms of mistakes, but like an adversarial edge case, where a customer tries
Yeah.
to misuse a
So
chatbot.
the very first things that we've done are mainly the AI providing information. So, oh, how do I debug this? Or what do I need to do if I want to change my address in your system? It's guiding people, but it's not actually performing high stakes actions. Okay. So we are now being asked to allow the AI to make some decisions about high stakes actions, like issuing a refund or selling someone a Chevy Tahoe. Well, that's not a real one, but for us yet. But you can imagine, right? So in that case, what happens is the AI is set up in such a way that it knows the API call in the pre-existing system, like Salesforce or whatever it is, to reach out and say, okay, yeah, we're upgrading that person, or here's a return label that we're sending them, right? So those actions the AI can know how to do, and it actually can. We give it a set of rules, and it can follow those rules and say, okay, if the customer has said X, Y, and Z, then yes, we are going to send them this return label, right? Now, obviously, those API calls, you can log them and you can have people looking carefully at the API call. So you could put a delay in where some of your experienced human agents, for the API calls that are very high stakes, like you are going to incur $100 cost to the company because they're going to ship back the refrigerator to you or something, right? Or you're going to sell a Chevy Tahoe. You can put an interrupt in there so that it comes. You have one of your experienced agents just monitoring, and they have an approval screen where the AI wants to do this, but we don't let him unless the human looks at it and says, okay, yeah, we can issue the, let me review what's been said in the conversation. Yes, we can issue the return. So obviously that kind of circuit breaker with a human in the loop can still be part of the system. And I think if I anticipate what's going to happen, there'll probably be a phase where a lot of that monitoring is happening. But then, like after a while, if the BPO is good and they realize, well, okay, yeah, the AI makes a mistake 0.5% of the time, but my agents used to make a mistake 3% of the time, right? And so they're still like happy. They're still like, wow, I'm saving tons of money because this AI is making mistakes. And they could eventually like completely turn off the human circuit breaker part of it because they just become convinced that they don't need it and they only need to monitor it on a 24-hour basis or 48-hour basis or something like that. By the way, all of this is very similar to what quantitative hedge funds do because their business is having the algorithm trade for them. So the $1 billion swings, the number one thing that organization does is allow the AI to trade for them. But of course, they build backup systems where they're monitoring: is AI losing money for us? Is it gone crazy? Like all of those things are pretty well understood how to do in the industry, and we would make that available obviously to a BPO if the AI were making high stakes decisions for the company.
Yeah, like a bank, reversing a credit card charge or something like that. Anytime there's a financial
Right.
cost, yeah, that would be it. I'm wondering
Right.
though, is that part of the training process also? Like mistakes agents have made in the same way you give your manuals, I
Yeah,
don't know,
you
depending on the client, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, this is a great point, Dom. So examples are great. So in other words, if you have coded up, actually, they could just be actual conversations that have happened in the past, and you can flag it and say, yeah, this was a mistake. This should not have been done. You can put that in the memory of the AI and say, okay, sometimes people are asking for this, and we should never approve it if XYZ applies, and then here's an example. And that actually is useful to the AI. And believe it, it will get surfaced
Kind of like a
through
negative
our
prompt,
memory.
right? You don't do this or something like that, right? And
Exactly.
that's
So
part of
all
the
that
process.
works. Like these things are, they're so different from the brittle flow bots with hard coded if then things. They're not like that at all. They literally, if you surface the right part of the memory, the AI will read that in a sense instantaneously and adjust its behavior based on what it just read from the memory. Right. So they're almost like humans. I mean, in a certain sense, they're like humans. That's why it's amazing. So you can rely on them. Actually, in our testing, you can rely on them to actually make decisions according to simple rules.
Yeah. And since we're kind of getting in the weeds of it, um, based on your recent experience with your clients, um, do you have a view on kind of how much process needs to be re-engineered? I mean, obviously, that might be on the client side, right? But just to give people an idea of now that we're going to put a chatbot in, what are kind of the usual things to expect in terms of re-engineering? Any discussion there
The,
on?
the fastest turnaround time is literally where they only want our AI to be informational. So either giving agent assist information, or just giving back, like chatting with someone over their phone and telling them how to fix some problem, right? Those can be set up in literally like kind of like 1 day or 1 week kind of timescales. If you have a system where you want you want the AI to do a call to look up the customer information and then decide like, okay, yes, we are going to send you this in the mail. Obviously, we have to integrate then with whatever system or platform is pre-existing. We're never asking people to modify their pre-existing system. Like if they're on Salesforce, we're never asking them to move off Salesforce. We just need the detailed API calls that our AI needs to actually perform the tasks. But that is really just a matter of like our engineering team talking to their engineering team, running some tests. And, obviously it's hard to predict how long that takes, but it's not like, it's definitely not something like a 6-month re-engineering process with armies of consultants or something like that. It's nothing like that.
All right. Maybe just along the lines of what other things need to be ticked off. Can you talk a little bit about compliance, regulatory? I don't know if that ever comes up, and of course, privacy and security. Of course, having automated chatbots. I mean, people still remember what happened to Samsung, like about a year ago, where, but that was kind of more of a security problem on the open AI side. But how would you guys handle that as part of your process dealing with the client?
Right. So there are a number of issues here. So one is, one of the problems we've had is within a big corporation, there is a legal department, and those guys are typically somewhat risk averse. And so they have not actually signed contracts before or developed contracts which allow a third party AI to be performing tasks for them, or to even be able to make calls and see customer information. So we need to often go sort of carefully through this with the lawyers. And the internal dynamic is sort of like this: the lawyer is risk averse because they don't want to risk their job. And they don't want to be the pioneer who writes the first AI contract ever, outsourced AI contract within that company. So typically, what has to happen is the business leader who wants this to happen needs to be involved in the conversations with lawyer, business leader, and us, where he says, yes, these guys are saying in the contract, as soon as our engagement ends, we return all data to you. We will not retain any data from you after the engagement ends. We will never disclose any data, concerning one of your customers to any third party, et cetera. So we are never asking for aggressive things. We're always trying to be the most cooperative partner in these things. But there's sometimes a roadblock because the lawyers just are unfamiliar with this particular situation. It's so new; it's never happened before. So that's one set of issues. Another set of issues is security. So one thing we didn't really talk about is that, so we've built this architecture as code that can run on any number of platforms. So it can run on Google Cloud, it can run on AWS, it can run on Azure. And typically, some of these guys already, like I know Azure already has very, very favorable privacy and security guarantees regarding the execution of LLMs, which are in their data centers. So all of that would apply to us too. So we would be basically giving them some code that runs in the cloud. It's calling GPT-4, say, through Azure, and the GPT instance is running on a Microsoft data center. So all of the security guarantees that are already there in the Microsoft legal arrangement would apply to what we're doing as well. It's basically going to be best in class, assuming that you're willing to run it on one of these cloud environments where our code can run. You've got all the guarantees already associated with those cloud environments.
Yeah, and I guess from the way you're describing it, it's deployed within the client's cloud infrastructure. There's no separate
Exactly.
instance running outside, and they need to make a call, which would then flag all sorts of
Exactly.
security protocols. All right, that's cool. Um, I guess um, thinking out loud, we talked about the tsunami, right? Eric's shirt, and it's 2024, barely the start of the year. So let's look at like kind of the next few months, because this thing could take a while, or this thing could just happen, in a flash. Can you give a situation, or give a scenario of.
I actually have a graphic which encapsulates this, then maybe I'll talk through it and Steve can add on.
Yeah,
So
if you have something, because I remember spending a big chunk of 2023 latter half feeling like it's a Mexican standoff. No one wants to be the first, but now I think we're gonna shift to no one wants to be the last. So
yeah,
anyway, thoughts on
Before,
that?
here we
yeah,
go.
before Eric shows the graphic, I just want to say one thing, which is that we are seeing a diversity of reactions from our customers in this space. So you already have customers that are saying, they're saying to us, we want an AI that is going to replace our existing first contact layer. So it's going to become the first contact layer. And if it has 80% resolution probability, then we can shrink the people who used to handle that first resolution layer by 80%, literally. And then we want you at the same time to be building the decision-making process into the AI so it can even do more, right? So that's the high-end stuff. And so most aggressive global brand wants to do that. And like the impact on the Philippines from that will be like whoever is sending their salespeople to try to bid for business with that global brand they're not gonna succeed, because that global brand already knows they want to move heavily into AI, right? So that's one extreme. On the other extreme, we're encountering people who just really don't have a good feel for what the AI can do. They need to listen to this podcast and the last one. And I think the biggest delay in getting from here to more or less the end state, where the mature AIs are really doing a lot of work that used to be done by people or assisting people, the main gap is the management teams at these BPOs and at the global brands understanding what is possible, understanding what the process uh, to get it going is, just understanding all that and overcoming their hesitation. But they'll be forced to eventually, because they'll just realize, hey, my competitor just launched a support AI, which people can just access on their phone. And it seems, of course, people monitor their competition, right? So if LG launches it and Samsung is looking at LG's thing and says, wow, that is really good. Shit, we got to launch an equivalent thing, because that's probably saving them a ton of money, right? So I think you're going to see this cascade effect, whereas right now there's a distribution. We see companies that just are a little bit too afraid and slow, or maybe their management is not very efficient. They're going to be the late movers. The early movers are already moving. And what will happen is eventually by mid-year, end of year, whatever, the late movers will see what their competition is launching, and then they'll be in a huge rush to move forward. Now, I don't know if 1 year is the time scale, but it feels like that's kind of roughly the time scale.
Yeah, and just thinking out loud of how this plays out, obviously the impetus will be on the offshoring entity. At least in many cases, it'll be the offshoring entity. So whoever is sending work across, they're the ones thinking of it actively. I'm wondering if there's also kind of a perspective where it's the BPO who initiates it, and again, that could be case to case. Any
Yeah,
thoughts about? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
sorry
go
to
for
hold
it.
up Eric's graphic again, but if you look at the biggest BPO companies that are public companies with hundreds of thousands of employees, they have to make public statements to the market in their quarterly earnings reports. So you can just go and read what their CEOs are saying. And a couple quarters ago, their CEOs were saying, we really see the potential for AI, but we have this hallucination problem. We're still worried about the hallucination problem. You're going to start to see those guys say things like, uh, we now understand that there are technologies out there that solve the hallucination problem. So now we're implementing AIs. And I think like I I would assume the smaller BPO, mid-size and smaller guys are monitoring what the CEOs of these massive companies that employ 500,000 people, what they're saying. But the moment they start hearing that, I think the alarm bells should go. If these smaller and mid-sized companies know what they're doing, the alarm bells should start going off. because these big companies are so big, they have very large internal tech teams. They can have huge teams which are devoted to AI, to looking at solutions like ours and trying to figure out who has the best, which of these startups has the best technology that we might adopt internally. So they have a lot of resources to basically make the right decisions and adopt stuff. So I think that will play a big role in how the adoption propagates throughout your industry.
Yeah. Oh, so Eric, did you have something to show? Let's have a look.
Yep. Here we go. Okay. I'll explain this. So this is a very famous graph from time discussing the amount of time for a certain AI capability like handwriting recognition, speech recognition, etc. How long it took for that capability to go from 0 to the superhuman performance. It's graphed against this timeline over here. So 2013, you see superhuman handwriting recognition. 2017, you see superhuman speech recognition, etc. In 2023, you see superhuman accuracy and CX. And I think what everyone should note is this: you are here. And I guess the point of this is that, in kind of a fluffy sci-fi way, which is kind of a bit too reflective of real life right now, the future is here, and the other more bizarre parts of the future, the more disruptive parts, are coming at an accelerating pace. I mean, we're both Filipinos, so we've both probably watched boxing, but to add on to what Steve said, amongst BPOs, there are really no weight classes. There will come a point, if it has not come already, where the flyweights will have to compete with the super heavyweights in terms of the data modes, in terms of the AI offerings, in terms of all of that. Because at the end of the day, the ultimate arbiter of who gets business is a company in the US, Australia, or Canada. And just to kind of go back to the tsunami analogy, regardless of whether it's a 6-foot or 600, or in the case that it's closer to a 600-foot tsunami, with the rate at which these things progress, maybe the one message I would leave people is, by the time this AI adoption thing becomes obvious, especially in a space that's as competitive as BPO, it might be too late. So, yeah.
No, that's pretty much a good way to, I mean, just thinking out, we're nearly at the hour. Still have a few more minutes. So maybe as a, and this tells me there's going to be episode 3, gentlemen. So buckle up for the next one. But maybe as a good parting thought, any early indications of kind of the economics of this? For example, you mentioned 80%, Steve, right? 80% of level 1 could go like in one go. AI is very scalable, much faster than HR. And in terms of costs, not absolute numbers, maybe percentage wise, do you have kind of a running figure in your head? Because eventually that's going to be the major decision, if we can reduce cost by X, or reduce headcount by Y. I mean, just off the top of your head, do you see any trends coming up?
Yeah, we've looked very careful at these numbers because obviously, as a startup, I should say that when our company was founded over a year ago, the issue was, can we solve the hallucination problem? Can we attach a memory to an AI? But we weren't sure what vertical we were going to be applying that technology. We might have gone into medical services where our AI is basically a nurse practitioner that's helping you, or a teacher that's trying to teach you introductory chemistry or history or something. So those are other verticals. We didn't know BPO was going to be the vertical that we might land in, but we have kind of landed here for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is we've analyzed the economics. And one of the interesting things we learned is, for these layer 1 type resolutions for a consumer electronics product, the typical number of resolutions you get out of a human per day is on the order of 10 or 15. Because if you think about it, the human's working for 8 hours, and maybe it takes them half an hour or 40 minutes to like step this 60-year-old lady through like how to like reboot her TV or iPad or something, right? So the AI is so much less expensive per resolution than paying for 40 minutes of a human's time, right? A highly skilled call center worker who understands how an iPad works, 40 minutes of that person's time versus the inference cost of running a model, at a Microsoft or Azure or AWS cloud facility. And those costs are coming down like crazy. So the economics are very, very favorable. And so it's only going to get better because people are figuring out how to make the models faster, how to make the models cheaper to run. The capacity in these data centers is being built up like crazy. Just look in NVIDIA's stock price because they're the ones powering all this. So all those economics are favorable toward AIs and less favorable toward human labor. So the main difficulty for us is to figure out how to price. We can see we're generating this much value for our customer. How much of that, as the technology startup that produces the AI, how much of that are we going to be able to capture? And that's an internal issue that we're dealing with as a company. It's not really the main issue for the BPO company. They definitely know they can get a significant savings at the same quality level, customer satisfaction level. They can perform the task at a fraction of the cost that they used to pay.
Yeah, certainly. And then just recalling from the start of the chat, there's a kind of an emerging framework already in terms of cost dynamics. Maybe this is something we talk about on the third run. Certainly, agent onboarding is one dynamic. Stability in terms of headcount. Third would be error rates, much lower. Obviously, the biggest mover would be the call handling capacity. I mean, just on those four areas alone, you know. And then you mentioned that people are looking at potentially 80%, offloading 80%, either headcount wise or call wise, of the first level of customer contact. And again, nuances the nuances can vary by BPO, by client, maybe even by function, but generally, I mean, those would be four common attributes across any type of call center or any type of BPO activity. Uh, and and then voice, non-voice. I mean, in your experience, of course, voice is sexy, right? You can hear an agent talking, but just non-voice could be a massive boost already. I mean, just thinking out loud,
Yeah. So I want to comment on that, Dom. So we started out, the main question was, can we create a narrow AI that's superhuman, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't hallucinate? And if so, we thought, okay, there are a lot of applications for that. We were mainly, for most of the company's existence up till now, thinking about text interface. So more like just what you would do with ChatGPT in a text window, right? And we already thought, okay, there's a lot of value in that. And when we tested the voice, so AIs which specifically convert voice to text back and forth, that's a whole separate technology area that's different from what we were doing. When we looked at it 6 months ago, we said, yeah, this looks like it's going to be a little irritating for the human because the lag times are too long and the accuracy wasn't quite there. But everything is moving so fast now. There's so much money and talent being poured into all areas of AI that we went back and looked at it because one of our customers said, hey, we want a voice version now of this thing. The chat thing works great. We want to see voice. So we went and looked at that, and we ourselves, I mean, we're technologists, right? But we ourselves were shocked at how much voice had improved just in the time we took our eyes off it. We took our eyes off it to focus on what we were doing. And now I'm convinced there's going to be very, very high quality, pleasing voice capability, which is dirt cheap because we were already telling our customers that, yeah, we can probably deploy that pretty soon. So it's just going to get better. So the thing you heard that we demoed on this podcast is actually already behind what we can do. Like we can do better than that. And it's a kind of choice. Like, do you want the customer to be, quote, fooled into thinking the AI is actually human, or do you want to keep it a little robotic so that they don't think you're trying to fool them? That's a decision for the BPO to make, but everything in that range is possible. So, the technology just is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah. And again, we've barely scratched the surface. Here we are again. We're at the end of the hour. But yeah, I want to thank Steve, Eric. You guys are doing awesome work, and it's nice to get into a little bit of detail behind what you're doing. Yeah, and looking forward to episode 3 where we talk about, a bit more about the economics of it, and I'm sure by that time we might even have a few examples of BPOs who have already signed up. In fact, I have a couple of conversations coming up with BPO executives who are asking kind of the other side of this question. Okay, when is it gonna come? I mean, it's, as you mentioned, it's really it's not just a technology change; it's a management change, it's a cultural change. Because the tech's already there. It's really more of getting out of this Mexican standoff situation, and then you did mention monitoring what CEOs are talking about, financial headwinds, on the offshoring entities. The first thing they're going to look to optimize is this kind of cost, staffing cost, support cost, and work that's already been offshored by definition has been, in a way, re-engineered already for offshoring. Now it doesn't take a lot to re-engineer it for automation, for AI.
Yeah, I just have one last comment. So the BPO industry here is built on global labor arbitrage. So, right, basically there are certain tasks where for a certain level of quality, it's cheaper to do it over here, and kind of with the process control and error control, it can be reintegrated into what the US guys are doing with with negligible negative effect to the final product. But but for better or worse, like with the appearance of these superhuman AIs and CX, for labor arbitrage, 1 plus 1 no longer equals 2. And really the only way to keep up with the favorable economics of the past so that it does make sense for work to go from abroad to over here. It's really just for people to keep up with the times, hopefully sooner rather than later.
If
All
I could
right.
make one last comment. So
Yeah, go
Dom,
for it, Steve.
I like your characterization of Mexican standoff, where it's like, who's going to be first to try this out and go through all the wrinkles and overcome all the little bumps in the road and stuff. What's interesting is that for the customers we deal with who are first movers, so they're willing to go for whatever reason, like maybe the CEO or founder is really pro AI, or there's some really functional, strong person on their team who just wants to shepherd this through. For whatever reason, that is getting done right now. So then what will happen is all the guys who were part of that Mexican standoff will see their competitors launch things that are a little mind blowing. And that is what is going to break the dam, I think. And if you're one of the big guys, like several 100,000 employee BPOs, you just need to have 1 or 2 pilots work out for you, and then suddenly you realize I can generalize this pilot to every consumer electronics brand I'm working with. I can generalize this pilot to every travel support brand that I'm working with. So I think it's going to be like slow until the dam breaks, and then everyone's going to be like going crazy trying to like figure out how to incorporate AI.
Which is pretty much what a tsunami looks like, right? It's just
Yes,
slow,
exactly.
gradual, and then the whole thing just
Yeah.
goes.
Yes.
All right. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to our next chat. But in the meantime, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Superfocus. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more stories about the great things you guys are going to do.
Thank you.
Take care.